In today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most challenging topics for beginners, which is how to deliver pawn play in closed positions, aka positions where no pawns have been traded off. The thing is, these can be pretty difficult to play because the direct threats are going to be useless for the most part. So instead, what you are aiming at is slower play that is going to be more rewarding in the long run. So let's dive right into the game. Welcome back, everybody. Getting a black game. We are slowly but surely approaching 500 elo, and opponent plays e4. As a general opening strategy, we're going to be going for c6, d5, no matter what our opponent is going to play. But to kind of give you a bit of a reference point, against e4, we're going to be playing Caro-Kann, and against anything else, we're going to arrange our pieces in Slav defense fashion. So, just before we get back to the game, e4, Caro-Kann, anything else, do the same but with a Slav setup, with the goal of not really following theory but avoid getting bad pieces. So, okay, we get this position. Now, as black, naturally we on a castle, normally short, but we need to develop those pieces, and notice that we no longer have the natural square for the knight. You don't want to put it on the edge either. Knight is bad on the side, also it can be taken. And you don't want to be playing e6 blunting the bishop. So, because I want to go e6, eventually get these guys out and castle, I will play bishop f5 first. Very important move. And only then e6. So this way, I'm not going to restrict the bishop by a pawn. Alright, bishops are very valuable pieces. You can think of the bishop being worth 3 points and a quarter, and the knight 3 points. So bishops are slightly better pieces than the knight because they will cover more ground in the endgame, generally. So it's really like a waste to have a 3 points value piece and just restrict it with a pawn like that, unless you have to. Okay, how are we gonna do this? Threat and drawback behind our opponent's last move. So he just played bishop d3. Let's see if you guys can find the threat. He quite obviously wants to challenge our bishop. Is there a drawback? No major drawback. So, alright. Now, what should we do? We have an interesting situation approaching a trade. Normally, you don't want to take every trade for granted. But in this situation, our bishop is undefended. So, going bishop g6 would lose a bit of time, and playing e6 would allow double pawns for no reason. So in this case, it's very nice to just take and get rid of the bishops. Also, considering the fact that this is a position with more space for our opponent, trades are gonna be very welcome, and I'll explain in a second why. Okay, he took with the queen. No threat. No drawback. Yeah, queen is eyeballing these squares, but cannot really make use of them. Remember, our goal is to castle. So we're going to play e6 and try to develop these pieces. So, alright. I wanted to explain one concept, but I'll do it when opponent finally slows down a little bit. Hopefully he will slow down in this game. But let's watch out for this move. So, indeed, I want to develop these guys, but very important. You should always really watch out for opponent's move. It's like trying to drive a car, but you're doing it blindfolded. You're not looking away. First, you need to look away, then make any decisions. So, queen to b3. Threat. Queen takes on b7. targeting undefended pawn. Drawback, he's moving the queen already for the second time while neglecting piece development. Okay. How do we go about protecting the pawn on b7? So there are many ways to do it, but I'll teach you one idea that I think should really stick in your brain. Because you can protect it with a queen, which is a fine move. You can protect it with a queen that way, also as a fine move. But I want to show you this concept of having, let's say, low energy defense, like solar panels on your house. So, like, I want to go b6. I don't want to sign up the queen, which is worth 9 points, to defend a pawn, which is worth only 1 point for the rest of the game. I just want to pass that assignment to another pawn. So it doesn't really make a difference in this current position, but in general, it's a very good thinking process to have while splitting the tasks for your pieces. So, all right, b6, he played knight f3. Knight f3 covering this square, overprotecting the center. No particular drawback for that move, yeah. Knights are coming on natural squares, usually. And, okay, how do we continue? We have this bit of a problem that it's not easy to finish development. So, a lot of players will be making the mistake of going bishop e7 first. And then your knight doesn't have a square. So it's important to solve the issue of the knight first and only then move this guy in order to castle. It's a bit of a Caro-Kann idea. Okay, I'm not gonna really spoon feed you opening theory move, but I'm trying to show you how to think about these positions. And we get bishop g5. Let's see if you know what the bishop g5 move is. So, first of all, it is a pin, meaning we cannot continue by trying to solve the knight problem to move it away, because that would leave my queen undefended. But on the other hand, a really important concept, bishop on g5 is a piece, is an enemy piece in our half of the board. So you want to get rid of these kind of pieces immediately as a rule of thumb. So we're simply going to play h6. Let's see. A lot of these guys are going to take because they're hungry takers. But if you remember what I mentioned a little bit ago in the beginning, bishops are worth 3 points and a quarter, and knights only 3 points. So opponent just lost a quarter of a point. This is a negative trait for him to give up bishop for knight for free. Okay, simple decision to make. We have 3 captures. Which one would you take with? The answer is pretty simple. If you remember that our plan is to get castle short, we just capture with a bishop. And also, another reason why this trade was definitely to our advantage as black is because it is a position with extra space for our opponent. How can you figure out who has more space on the chessboard? It's very simple. You just have to figure out the side that has more pawns in the center. That will usually have more space and will, as a result, pretty much dominate the game. In this case, notice that white has 2 pawns against 1 in the center. So they have 2 versus 1 advantage. For this reason, on a move like h6, it would be clever to avoid trading. It would be clever to move the bishop anywhere. The side with more space normally wants to avoid trades because enemy position is a bit cramped. It's difficult to just like move around when you don't have space. Okay, Knight c3. Doesn't seem to be a particular threat. Potential drawback is that the queen is feeling a little bit like a sardine. Yeah, the queen doesn't have so many squares. Gonna continue our plan. Gonna castle, and we have two more things on our to-do list. We need to develop the knight, develop the queen. Notice how the queen is simply useless on b3, has zero pressure, thanks to this important concept. I forgot to mention in the beginning, another reason why this is such an effective structure is because we have pawn protected by pawn. You can usually think of this structure as a crystal. The main reason why crystals are so nice is that they are unbreakable structures that really limit the enemy long-range pieces. So when you have a pawn protected by a pawn, it could be completely blunting the action of an enemy queen, an enemy rook, let's say, sometimes an enemy bishop even. So, yeah, black is doing fairly well, but still we're just going to be playing this game of simple decision making. Okay, he did rook a e1. Threat and drawback. Doesn't seem to come with a particular threat. Drawback could be trapping his own rook a little, although it could make some sense if the knight moves away, this rook could move, but rook on f1 looks a bit stuck. Okay, last part of our plan. Want to move the queen. Where should we move the queen? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares available. Also notice that the queen moves develops last. It's very simple. You want to move the queen and connect rooks. So by elimination, queen c7 is the square. Now rooks are protecting each other. This is a very nice strategy in general to keep your rooks connected. Not because you're necessarily gonna win anything with it, but you're not gonna be losing anything. That's gonna be more important. Because if your rooks are undefended, they could be vulnerable to tactics. Now they're protecting each other. So next up, our strategy will be to pretty much play a waiting game. And we are just looking for unprotected pieces. We love unprotected pieces pretty much like a police officer loves donuts. You're playing 500 elo games, you just want to wait for undefended pieces. And we're gonna be, okay, on a bit of a junk food diet, but it's definitely gonna take you pretty close to 1000 elo. If you just play safe chess, always be in this healthy habit of asking yourself threat and drawback behind my opponent's last move. And wait to punish a potential donut. There is no donut yet. Now, I know you may be wondering, okay, Alex Banzea, but what if there is not gonna be a donut? How do we win a game of chess? There are a few ways to go about it. A typical mistake would be to kind of throw these random jabs at your opponent, meaning aggressive piece movement randomly all over the board. Like in this position, aggressive piece movement for me would be some random bishop g5 or try to somehow attack the queen with a piece instead of looking for a pawn break. So the trick is to think in terms of pawn breaks. Now, my opponent just played knight d1. Knight d1. Generally, when you're placing a piece on the first rank, there is not going to be a concrete threat behind it. Is there going to be a drawback though? Knight no longer pressures these squares. That's kind of about it. Now, I told you we need to go for a pawn break. We generally want to go for a pawn break in the center of the board. So we have a choice between c5 or f6. Which one do you think is the better move? Pause the video and think about it. I know it's super tempting to play f6, thinking that, oh, we're going to get some rook activity and life is going to be like a honeymoon. But the issue with a move like f6 is that it creates an unprotected pawn, which could potentially be targeted by the enemy rook. So as a rule of thumb, while dealing with a pawn chain, you wanna attack the pawn chain at its base, not on the top. So e5 is the top, d4 is the base. The base, it's the pawns that are, let's say, from where the pawn chain begins. Let's say if he plays c3, pawns will be connected, base would be on b2, in theory. So for now, we are hitting the base. It's just like cutting a tree. I guess it would be pretty difficult to chop a tree at the top, even though you shouldn't be actively cutting trees. Don't do that. Just cut the enemy pawn base. So c5, and he played c3. Okay, c3. He protects. Is there a drawback? Not really. By the way, kudos to my opponent. He's playing definitely very solid so far. No undefended pieces and rather strong strategy. Now, what should we do? We have an interesting situation with a pawn tension. So, how do you solve these pawn tensions in chess? See, like this pawn can eat that pawn. They can eat each other, basically. Simple good rule to pretty much get the right answer most of the times. Don't take unless you clearly get something out of it. So if you take, he simply is gonna replace this pawn. So what do you gain out of it? Not much. So we're gonna push. Oh no, my opponent disconnected. No, he may have gotten bored because I take a lot for these moves. Please come back. Don't ruin the content. Brother. Brother, don't go away. No, it was such a nice Karokan game. Alright, he's back. He's back. That gave me a little bit of a panic attack. Somebody has to eat. He cannot just leave me jobless. Okay. He went back with a queen. Okay. How is queen c2? Queen c2 is a bit of a donut. It's an undefended piece. We cannot take advantage of it. But just be aware of that. Now, what to do next? Remember what I said a second ago. You wanna hit the pawn chain at its base. So the base is b2. Now, the problem is if you try to go a5, a4 and hit it, it's gonna stop you with a3. So the way to do it is to go for b4. And once you're gonna be capturing, the base of the pawn chain will move to c3. And that's gonna be an undefended pawn. So, wow, he goes b4. b4. Interesting, very interesting. Now, what are our options? Opponent is trying to stop our strategy. Yet again, no interesting business in playing f6 simply for a weakening reason. Now, it's important to at least be aware that you can en passant. You can en passant because the pawn moved 2 squares. So pawn was an initial square. and our pawn has just crossed middle of the board. So en passant is a possible move. But with the patience of an of a crazy chess master, I'm gonna resist the temptation of en passant. Just wanna look for his pawns to open up lines for our pieces. So gonna go a5, try to open up path for the rook. Notice how we barely use our pieces, which is very interesting. I didn't actually expect such a predominant pawn play in a 500 elo game. And trust me, I played quite a bit of these games as a training for making these videos. But this is very interesting strategical game. And my opponent went ba. Now, if you remember a second ago, I mentioned with pawn tension, only take if you gain something out of it. Opponent took, but not really getting anything in return. So, because I'm threatening to take twice, and he only has a defender, he should have simply played a3. And the game pretty much remains close to balanced. Now, after pawn takes, notice that he has double isolated pawns. Now I have rook takes or queen takes. I'm gonna take with the queen simply because it's the move that comes with the tempo. So while choosing between two moves that look equally good, you generally want to prioritize the tempo move. Let's see. Okay, knight e3. Threat. No particular threat. Drawback. So the knight no longer covers these squares. I guess the pawn on c3 is a bit softer. Okay. There's a pawn on a2. Should we take or not? While going about these decisions, you don't want to base yourself on counting attackers against defenders. You want to try to visualize. So queen a2, rook a2. Nice, we're winning a pawn. So really want to get yourself into the habit of visualizing if possible. Rook a1. Threat. Drawback. No particular drawback. Okay, now this is very important moment because a trade is available. It's a critical moment in chess. We have a choice between taking, but then he's gonna be taking, and he will have full control over the open file. So generally, while dealing with a trade, remember that you wanna do it in your terms. You wanna get the best version out of it. So I'm gonna play rook a8, keeping tension and saying, fine, we can trade rooks if you really want to, but I'm gonna keep the open file. I'm gonna get the bigger slice of this quattro formaggi pizza on the chessboard. Is it really like a pizza? That doesn't really look like a pizza. Maybe I'm just hungry recording in the morning. Okay, rook b1. Opponent declines the trade. Threat. Pawn is under attack. And no significant drawback. Okay. We need to protect pawn. How do we protect pawn? We have rook b8, rook a5, or the other rook. So there's many ways to do it. I think both rook b8 and rook a5 are fine. The most important concept is that you want to keep the rook active. You don't want to make one of your most active pieces on the board, pass it at defensive duty if somebody else could be in charge. So that's why I chose the rook from the a rank, because it wasn't it was a good rook, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't that active. Okay, now opponent goes back to the trading mode. My rook is hanging. Um, what should we do? I could exchange and concede the file, but I want to teach you to not give up on files. So I'll repeat the position once. It was a possibility to trade and break with b4. It was gonna be the best play, but I'm gonna try to not play the sharpest moves and just try to teach you a solid, simple decision without having to rely much on calculation. So if he goes back to b1, I'm gonna use the rook to guard like that if he goes there. Yet again, he's under the threat of losing a rook, so it's important to not forget. Some people, yeah, get distracted and forget about attacks. And I'm gonna be using this rook, very important. I wanna keep the activity of the a2 rook. Remember that rooks on the second and seventh rank are usually the sweet spots for the rooks. Rooks are feeling the best while on those squares. All right, rook c1, protecting the pawn. No threat and no drawback. You want to think in terms of a pawn break? Only pawn break is b4 available, so I want to support that in a way. So I'm going to move my knight, heading towards c6 square, from where it's supporting b4 push. Knight c2, no threat, no drawback. Going to play knight c6. Okay, this game is, opponent is playing really well for 500 elo. I'm getting low on time. I cannot explain everything in full depth, but hopefully this still makes sense. I'm just gonna use my pieces to deliver b4 break. We need to open up the game with the pawn. As I said in the beginning, difficult part in chess is that you have this thinking that, okay, the pawns are meaningless. Why to waste time playing with pawns? Yeah, the least lower value piece on the chessboard. We should just make some fun and move the queen early. Queen is very powerful and so on. But you see really like how much the game is impacted by pawn play. Okay, now we have choice between taking with knight or bishop. We prioritize lower value piece. So knight is weaker than a bishop. We take with a knight. We keep the stronger piece. So please remember, bishop worth 3 points and a quarter. Knight worth only 3 points. So now rook a4, targeting the pawn. Rook was under attack. We're just hunting his isolated pawn. Please notice that the b4 pawn is an isolated pawn simply because it cannot be protected by any other white pawns. It doesn't have any pawns nearby. There are no white pawns on this file anymore that can be put on c3 or a3 to cover it. So isolated pawns normally are very weak units that you can take advantage of. Yet again, big shout out to my opponent though, I have to say. One of the best 400 elo players that I faced. And I played roughly 60 training games. But g3. Okay, g3 makes a luft. No threat, no drawback. I can take with the bishop or with the rook. I'm gonna take with the rook just to prioritize trades. We're up material. When you have at least an extra pawn, the game becomes more of like a trading contest. So you just want to exchange all the pieces. Now, I don't want to move the bishop because I would be losing the pawn. So I have to protect the bishop. And the only move to protect the bishop is to move the rook back. The precious rook from the second rank. Sadly. And then we'll have to use this pawn to push. We have to push, otherwise these pieces are kind of stuck. h4. No threat, no drawback. Let's try to push. c3, c2. Could be one of the next moves. Opponent should perhaps play 91 to try to stop it. Yeah, okay, very good play by my opponent yet again. Very good play. Yeah, I mean, our pieces notice that are currently kind of stuck, so there is not much we can do. I'm just gonna move the bishop back. And we are opening up rook path and also opening up pawn path. Takes on b5. Just gonna go collect the free pawn. And on the check, it's good that we have a luft. We play that early in the game, so never get back rank checkmated. Now, it would be good for him to try to put the rook behind as a general strategy. The rook is best placed behind the pawn, not in front of a pawn. Notice that if you put rook in front of the pawn, it's only fighting for 2 squares, 1, 2. But if you put the rook behind, it's fighting for all of them. I cannot even count how many. So that is generally optimal rook placement in rook endgame. Okay, we have knight f3, threat, and drawback. So my rook is attacked. Drawback. The knight no longer covers the pawn. So I'm gonna move my rook with a check, and then we can push the pawn and get a promotion. Wow, quite an advanced game, I have to say. It happens like this sometimes. So important why I always say to treat these games very seriously. Just because these guys are 400 elo, 500, it doesn't mean that they are idiots. We're playing this 15 minutes with 10 seconds increment. People have time to think. While they're thinking, they will always have reasons behind their moves. You just need to be looking for their strategy and identify potential mistakes. So, okay, when an opponent like this plays good moves for a long period of time, it's possible, yeah, you may fail to keep up with him, which is normal. You don't want to expect to pretty much win all the games, but take it as a learning experience. Even if you lose, and as long as you constantly make good simple decisions, you're definitely gonna be doing well in the long run. We went over many important concepts in this game, so just to mention a few of them. In the beginning, we use this crystal, pretty much using as little as possible energy to protect the pawn. I don't want to give the queen such an assignment, high value piece. I don't want to waste its energy for a simple pawn. And then once you get developed, important again, immediately get rid of enemy pieces in your camp. And once you get developed, instead of going for some crazy piece, aggressive piece movements, look for a pawn break. Pawn break in the center. When you're dealing with pawn chains, it's not going to be always the case that there's going to be a pawn chain. It happened in this game. We got advanced Karo Khan. But dealing with pawn chains, hit at the base, not at the top. Like cutting a tree, remember? So hit at the base and look for pawn play. Trade pawns only if you gain something out of it. There was nothing to be gained. There's no way to like use the C file. So pushed, grabbed more space, and was again looking to target the pawn at its base. So if opponent plays a3, I believe all the moves that we played so far were pretty much findable by most of you watching. Okay, maybe you're not gonna see how to make progress here. You take, the file opens, you double up, and you don't know what to do next. It's okay to just shuffle around, maybe even make a draw if there is no breakthrough. Making a draw in a 500 elo game would be quite an event if it's not a stalemate, but just saying, you don't have to overcommit and ruin your possession. Because, fun fact, in these kind of positions, the breakthrough it's a little bit more obscure and it's very advanced. Many players would have complete blind spot for this. But just for kind of, I guess, as a fun fact, I will show you this idea even though it's a bit more advanced. We could be using this extra space and pawns in a pretty nice positional fashion. Because let's say, okay, white keeps doing nothing, moves the knight. There is a piece sacrifice looming on b4. So we could use like a similar maneuver like in the game. And if they do nothing, there is really a bishop sacrifice. So sacrificing 1 point of material, but for a very strong activity. Like getting strong knight and then potentially getting 2 connected passed pawns that are gonna be very difficult to stop. This would have been the breakthrough if my opponent wasn't making the mistake of releasing tension. On a3, yes, I know it's very difficult. You go for long-term positional piece sack and then you're gonna be with 2 connected pawns. It's not what you need to do to win 500 elo games. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that idea since you could potentially have something like this in the future in a Caro-Kann position. But you saw like this is how it's gonna happen most of the times. Our opponent failed to protect the pawn. Rook e2 was still saving it, but arguably we could continue with the b4 push either immediately or we can try to improve the position of the knight. But yeah, one concept pretty much dictates all the play. It's the pawns that open up the path for the pieces and not the other way around. So I hope you guys learned something from this game, even though it was quite a complex game for this rating range. And with that being said, we can move on to the following game, or perhaps the next video. Thanks everybody for making it all the way this far into the video. Now, in case you're enjoying my lessons about the fundamentals, make sure to subscribe to my Jobava newsletter. I'm actually also writing a book on fundamentals, which I was way too lazy to make a separate newsletter for. So subscribe to that, and I'll see you around on the channel. Have a good one.